Today I'm making Arya's Catspaw Dagger from Game of Thrones, and I need materials. So I'm at the hardware store to get some wood. Actually, it's right over there. No, that's not what I want. Let's see. Ah, yes. That's what we want right there. Got my pattern, the Catspaw Dagger, already figured out. Drew this yesterday, so I can cut that out and get started. This dagger is easily one of the most influential items in this series. It's been around the whole series. It's done many things. I would argue this is one of the items, a prop, that has had the biggest impact on its story, or one of them anyway. Actually, can you think of any examples of other props that have had an incredible impact on the story? Obvious examples: Thanos' Infinity Gauntlet, the DeLorean, lightsabers. Those are all really good examples. But if you can think of another example of a prop that has played as pivotal a role in the story as this dagger, let me know in the comments. I'd love to get some more ideas. Boy, that is not a small dagger. But that's about right for scale. I've got plenty of wood here in case I goof up. Now is the time to trace my pattern onto the wood. Here we go. This is our outline, the profile we're gonna work from. The handle I'm gonna sculpt on top of it, and I need a way to hold the blade upright. So I'm actually gonna lop a little bit off of the end here and put a sturdy wire in there so that I can have something to hold it upright while I'm sculpting. But also I'll have a piece of wire in this tip where I'm going to sculpt some epoxy clay, and that'll reinforce it. So that is the plan now to go to, I'm guessing, the bandsaw, cut this out. Tell you, this is some good Valyrian poplar here. I like using poplar or wood as opposed to like MDF because the grain runs this direction, making it a lot more durable. It's not going to snap in half. A 1/4-inch sheet of MDF might snap under that kind of pressure. Anyway, cut everything out with a bandsaw. You could also use a scroll saw or a handheld coping saw for that. Then I use my big sanding tools to clean up the blade, but I need a little more precision over here, so I'm gonna use my rotary tool. Of course, you could use your rotary tool for all of this, and I'm gonna need it as well to put some bevels up here. Our handle is from here down, and I'm gonna sculpt over all of that. So while I am gonna come in here and clean up all these cuts with my rotary tool, if I overdo it a little bit, that's okay. It's all gonna get covered up. So right now I'm really just getting this down to the right profile. We're off to a fantastic start. The next thing I want to do, since I have my rotary tool handy, is to add these bevels. So I can cut the template apart a little bit here and use it to mark where those bevels need to go. Pattern can go right back where it started. I'm gonna trace the line right here so I know where the sculpt for my handle starts and stops. There. And then I can trace this bevel right along there and along the top. I'll do this on both sides. I can also mark about halfway just by eye using my finger. That's close enough for me. You know what, I wonder if I should taper the tip of this a little bit. On second thought, before I do the bevels on here, I want to taper the very tip of this. Right now the two faces are parallel. I want them to taper together. So I'm going to use the belt sander to just kind of get a little bit more of a point on it. Then I'll redefine those lines. Then I'll put my bevels on. To the belt sander! Got my bevels sanded down to a 220 grit. They're looking mighty fine. Before I start covering the handle in my epoxy clay to sculpt it, I want to locate where the gems are going to go. So that's from my blueprint right there. So I know where they're going to go, but that's going to get covered in clay. So I'm going to cut a little piece in that shape out of more of my 1/4 inch poplar here, and then glue that down so that when I'm sculpting, I can sculpt around that and I'll know where the gem should go. And I'm just going to use super glue for this. And I've got a little bottle of super glue accelerant right here. So I can just put a tiny bit down there. Now this is for a very specific gem. I've already got these gems. These were from the craft store. They came in a giant bag. I can't remember which project I got these for, but I wanted a specific color and shape, and they had it. So I bought the bag with all of them, and they happen to have these red ones that look really good for the Catspaw Dagger. I'll have a link to, I hope, something similar down in the description, along with the link to the pattern for this, which will be totally free if you want to give it a go. Just know that you may need to put your own sized gem in it, whatever you can scrounge up. Just about time to start sculpting, but I want a nice way to hold this upright. I have a heavy piece of particle board here as my base. I also got this sturdy piece of wire. It's really, really rigid, so it should be able to hold it up if I put it in the base there. Now I just have to carefully drill a hole down there. Oh, that is nice and snug. I nearly forgot this groove. There's a groove in the top of the blade there. And I want to do that before I do any sculpting. So I'm just going to mark off where that's going to go. Right along the edge like that. I did some testing on a scrap piece of wood here, and I think this is going to be the best bit here. It's round, but it's kind of a cutting bit, so it should be able to scoop out that groove like an ice cream scoop. After a little bit of practice on my scrap piece here, freehanding it seems to be my best method, but you may find your own good method. Our groove looks pretty good. I do want to go sand it, and to get in there, I've got some flexible sandpaper. This is 220 grit. I also have these sculpting tools, and I'm going to use the smallest one to run the sandpaper down into that groove. That way I can clean it up and maintain that nice rounded dish. Before I do any sculpting, I'm just covering the blade in masking tape so that I don't get any of the epoxy or the putty on the blade. I want to keep that nice and clean. Finally, it's time to get to sculpting, and I'm going to glue my wire into the sword or dagger hilt. I don't want that coming out in the middle of sculpting. And then to do the sculpting, I've got Freeform Sculpt. There are a lot of different sculpting epoxies out there. This is just what we grabbed today. And I'm gonna mix up a whole batch of it. This stuff is 1:1 by volume, so I need to extract 2 similarly sized lumps. I've got the 2 halves doled out, and now I should mix them together. So this is an epoxy. There's a catalyst in there. It's gonna harden over time, so you only have a working time of about, I think, 1.5 hours on this thing. Yep, hot life is 1.5 hours. Cures overnight to a tough, rigid plastic. So we'll do our sculpting and then we'll let it cure overnight. Twisting it, you can still see all the streaks of the 2 different colors. So we wanna keep mixing this until it's all just one color. Got a big old wad of dough ready to go here. I'm gonna cut it about in half for each side. To start with, I'm just gonna cover everything as much as I can anyway. I bent my wire a little bit here to match where the tip of that point's gonna go. The cool thing is I can work now like so, and then if I need to set it down, I can put it back in there. So to start with, I just match a bunch of clay on there. Kind of mash as much of this down into the wood as I can to get it to stick. Made a lot of progress. My big lump of epoxy clay cured really fast. It started setting up in about 45 minutes, much shorter than the advertised pot life, but I had a big lump of it, so it probably got warm and kicked off. So I mixed up another batch to do a little bit more work, and this is kind of where I am right now. Obviously, very lumpy. I'm just smoothing it out with my finger. I put a lot more on here than I need. I'm slow at sculpting, but I'm a lot better at sanding. And once this is fully cured, I can go in and sand the rest of the details on here. So, and I'll have all the time in the world to do that. So right now I'm just taking some water and smoothing it out a little bit. There's way more on there than I need. That'll all get trimmed and sanded off later. Just sort of made a platform. I did sculpt a little bit in there. That's about the best I could do at the time I have. And I'll refine that later with my rotary tool. But for now, just smoothing everything up the best I can. And then I can set it in this thing, and I'm going to let it cure overnight. You know what, since I'm about to leave this overnight, I'm gonna try using this sanding sealer. I know it's something woodworkers will use to make the wood grain less pronounced. So I'm gonna put a layer of that on there. It takes an hour to dry, so I figure might as well put it on there and let that dry overnight as well. Just gonna mix it up. Oh yeah, that's separated. I gotta do a lot of mixing. So I guess this stuff is supposed to help sort of solidify the outer layer of wood so that when you sand it, it sands nice and smooth. The wood grain, even with priming and sanding, you can still kind of see it. You're not gonna get that nice, smooth, shiny surface. But this should help us a lot, so we'll see. I'm excited. If this turns out really well, then I will use this a lot more, which is great because I bought a quart of it and I'm not going to use very much on this dagger, am I? Our epoxy clay is fully cured and it is very hard. It'll be perfect for sculpting later, and I know I was just sculpting this with my sculpting tools, but I'm going to be doing subtractive sculpting with my rotary tool. I'm going to remove material this time. And I can take my time doing it. I'm looking forward to that. The blade feels really interesting. So I put that sanding sealer on there and it is feeling very rough. And I think that the liquid was absorbed and it made the grain swell a little bit, and then it dried that way, and I should be able to sand it really smooth. Maybe I'll have to sand it and put another coat of that sanding sealer on and then sand it again. We'll see. But I'm learning a little bit about a new material right now, and I'm excited about that. Before I get to that though, I'm going to start roughing out some of the shapes here on the handle. There's a couple things I want to accomplish with this first pass. I want to have a nice flat area up here to start sort of forming this gold part. So I'll flatten both sides, but I can also start by going in and removing material back down to the wood. You can see I've overlapped a little bit, and especially right here. And I can use my rotary tool to grind away until I get back down to the wood. That'll at least clean up this profile here, and then I can start carving in all of these details. Made a lot of progress. I'm starting to get pretty excited over here. I found that the rotary bit, the sanding drum here, got gummed up a lot, so I switched over to just this metal grinding bit. That seems to remove a lot of material really well. I flattened this whole surface here just on a piece of sandpaper so that I could trace on this sort of raised gold detail here. And then I want to start outlining it. I've got this really cool little bit I can use to carve a little line. And then I'm going to go in with this other metal cutting bit to start removing some more material. Kind of feel like some of my epoxy didn't cure all the way. It's a little soft, and that's probably why I'm getting all gummed up here. So I'm swapping between these bits. This one with the finer teeth tends to get bound up with stuff more than this guy, so I've been using this a lot. I still have to come in with like a brush and clean it out every once in a while. Slow work, but I'm getting there. I don't want to rush this because I don't want to have to fill and sculpt another part again. Let's go make some more dust. Details are coming along nicely. Now there are these rib things on the dagger here. I will go back in with my rotary tool and refine those, but I've just been using my X-Acto knife here just to carve it by hand and kind of define the edges to get started. This way I'm also removing big chunks of what I need to get rid of without turning it into dust. So I figured get started and remove the bulk of the material with a knife, and then I'll come back in with the rotary tool to do all the final detailing. And it seems to be working really well so far. I also have a lot more control with this knife than I do with a spinning, sanding, or grinding bit. In fact, if you do any wood carving, I've got some wood carving tools here as well that are really great for removing lots of material in a very specific way. But for me, the X-Acto is really my weapon of choice for a lot of things. I've been using one of these since I was a wee little kid. I actually got a Swiss Army knife for Christmas one year. It was a big deal. I think I turned 12. And the first thing I did with that Swiss Army knife was to close the blade on my finger. Right here is where the gem goes, and that's the piece of wood I put there to locate it, so I know where it's supposed to go. But there should be a lip around it, and I think the best way to do that would be to grind out some of this and recess this down in there. So I've got this sort of routing bit in my rotary tool here, and I'm just gonna sort of manual CNC, do like an adaptive clear on that. Don't ask me what my feeds and speeds are. There we go, all hogged out, and almost fits perfectly. That'll get refined a little bit later, and that's good to go. I won't glue that in until it's painted. There are some more gems on here. If I look at my reference picture, there's one in the middle of each of these, and I, fortunately, already have some black gems, and I think these ones are the right size for that. These are actually from our Skyrim costume, which means I've owned these for 6 years, I think. I have plenty left over. I can center it and trace around it, and that's where I need to drill a little hole. Wonderful. It's time to add some texture to our handle here. There's these really cool lines that kind of go that way with the handle. And I'm going to use this rotary bit again to carve tiny little lines everywhere, except for the high spots. It seems like those stay shiny. So I'm just going to concentrate on the low spots, add a whole lot of texture. We are looking really nice now. I do want to get this thing primed so I can spot anywhere that needs a little more work, but before I do that, I'm going to sand the blade. And this has that sanding sealer on it, so I'm going to go at it with some 220, just get it as smooth as possible. The idea here is that the sanding sealer gives us a nice rigid coat on the outside, and we can sand it and get rid of the wood grain, and it looks like it's doing a pretty good job. I'll know after I sand this and then hit it with primer. It is a new day. I let the primer dry. I actually spent most of yesterday doing all this carving. It was quite a lot of work, but I'm very happy with the results. One thing I want to touch up quick before I get to doing the finishing on here. There's still a little bit of wood grain peeking through. I think that sanding sealer did a good job, but I want to make sure there's no wood grain left on here. So, got myself a can of filler primer, and I'm going to hit just the blade with that and let it dry, and then I'll work on finishing everything else. My filler primer is still drying, but I didn't have to do the handle, so I can set it in my stand and work on it. And there are a couple of little spots here that need some filling. So I've got an air drying filler putty. Anywhere on the handle that's got like a bubble from the epoxy clay or maybe some deep scratches, I can fill those in now. And then I'll let everything dry and sand it. Our spot putty and the filler primer are dry, so it's sanding time. I'm gonna start with this 320. If I need something a little more aggressive, I have some 220 grit sandpaper. But really, I just wanna make this blade as smooth as possible and then fix all the little spots on here that were blemishes, but we're gonna make them look really good. While I get started on it, I would really like to thank the members of our Extra Credit Club. If you'd like to get access to some behind the scenes vlogs and build discussions for all of our builds, including this one, you can head on over to our website. We have a link down below. There are a couple different ways you can join. Patreon, of course, is a really great way. Also, right here on YouTube, there's a membership button down there. You can hit that. You'll be joined right away, and then you'll get access to all of our behind the scenes vlogs, extra credit content from the channel. That support is super duper helpful for us. It helps us pay for the rent around here, the electricity, helps us pay our employees, and it really, really makes a huge difference in what we can accomplish here at Punished Props Academy. So thank you to our current members, and if you haven't joined already, hit that link down below and consider tossing us a buck or two for our videos. It goes a long way to help us out. Thanks so much. I'm gonna get to sanding. Got everything sanded down to a 320 grit, and then I've just got this light scouring pad here, and I'm kind of buffing everything. It's just about time for paint. The next thing I'm gonna do is prime it, but I'm gonna use this nice fine surface primer. I wanna go for a glossy finish on this, so I'm gonna do this and then a little bit more buffing, and then it should be ready for paint. My primer's dry. Everything's looking really good. I'm about to start painting, but before I do that, I wanna go over, make sure there isn't any crud on the primer. I just have my scouring pad here. Sometimes not the cleanest shop, particles get stuck on your primer. Just want to make sure it's nice and tidy before we go to paint. We're going to do metallic paints, but I want to hit a black base coat first. So I have these Tamiya paint. I'll hit that with the airbrush. Once that's dry, I'm going to go over that with a gloss. If I had a glossy black, I'd use it, but I don't. So I'm going to give myself a little shiny insurance with this gloss. I'm using Aqua Gloss from Alclad because I'm going to do my metallics with some of their metallic lacquers. So why don't we head over to the airbrush, do a little painting. Everything's looking black and shiny, and I'm gonna do the blade color. I was thinking about using this Alclad steel that I have, but it's a little dark. I thought I had some polished aluminum. Turns out I'm all out. So I'm gonna pull an audible and use this Spaztix Mirror Chrome. It's super, super bright. I wanna paint just the blade. I don't really need to mask it. I just need to make sure I don't get any paint on the part of the handle here that needs to stay black. So I've got a piece of paper with some tape. I can wrap that around there and then paint the blade. Oh, it's so shiny. Gave all my paint about an hour to dry. It all seems dry enough to touch. The Spaztix leaves like a weird powder on there, so I just use a little cotton pad to buff it, and it seems like we're good to go. I also did a quick test with some masking tape to make sure that by masking and peeling it off, I'm not gonna lose any of my paint. It all seems dry enough. And I need to mask off the blade and the part on the handle I wanna keep black, so that then I can go in with my polished brass to do the last color. I think I'm all set here. I masked off everything that I want to stay black. The blade, I masked the edge there, but I can use my paper to cover the rest of it. And then I'm just going to use my polished brass lacquer to hit all that. Oh, it looks so magical. Oh, it's still all shiny and black under there. I love it. Nice. That looks really cool. All the paint's there. I got my masking tape off. I'm gonna do one more layer of this clear on everything to protect it. Then I'm gonna let this dry overnight. I put all this paint down in about the last 2 hours, and it's definitely not dry yet. So I'm gonna give it that time. Our clear coat has dried overnight, and it's time to try and replicate the look of Valyrian steel. It's kind of hard to see what exactly is going on in these screenshots, but I'm gonna do my best approximation. So the plan is I've got this teeny tiny little brush and I've got some gunmetal paint that I thinned a lot and I can paint little lines on there. But even though this brush is teeny tiny, I want it even tinier. So I'm not gonna destroy this one, but I have another sacrificial brush and I'm gonna cut most of these bristles off. All right, let's give that a try. Here's my gunmetal paint. I'm using Tamiya for this one. And I've got the thinner, so I can just dribble a tiny bit on there. Oh, maybe a tiny bit more. And really thin this paint. I don't want it to be opaque. I want it to be nice and see-through, so it's subtle. There we go. I may have to groom my paintbrush tip a little bit more, but that is definitely a nice thin line. And I think if I was going down, I'd have a little more control, yeah. Ooh, that's nice. Really thin lines. Okay, I think that's what I want to go for there. And it seems like it's even more subtle on the on this finish. That's kind of where I'm at. It's definitely not the same as whatever they have going on the prop from the show, but I think it looks pretty cool, so I'm gonna keep rolling with it. I'm gonna be here a while, so it's a perfect opportunity to remind you that the blueprints I made for this are free on our website over at punishprops.com. Also over there we have the page for our extra credit members. If you wanna join up, either on, right now we have Patreon and YouTube memberships. If you toss us a couple bucks, get access to some extra content. We have behind the scenes vlogs every week. And then for every build like this one, we do a build discussion with some sort of additional information about the project. We also post our Monday videos on Friday for all of our extra credit members. So again, we have a link to that down in the description, or right here on YouTube, you can hit the membership button. It helps us out a whole bunch, and we thank you. Oh, we also put our tools and materials list down in the description of every single video with links where you can buy this stuff so you can follow along at home. Those are usually Amazon affiliate links. We get a tiny cut of every sale and it helps us out a bunch, so thanks for using those. Of course, I made this out of rigid materials, but there are a lot of different materials you could use to make this out of. In fact, right now, at this very moment, our buddy Evil Ted is making one out of foam. He's been live streaming that, and I think he'll put that up on his YouTube channel once it's all done. So if you want a foam version, look for Evil Ted's video. And of course, it wouldn't be a YouTube video unless I asked you to subscribe. We do these prop and costume projects every week, and we're very excited to share them with you. If you don't want to miss them, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That is looking really cool. I like it. Let's see. We do need to put the gems in and do a little bit of weathering, but before I do that, I do want to lop off the wire I have here, and I'm just going to sand the end of that down smooth and then hit it with more of this brass colored paint. Also, my clear coat did something weird on this specific spot. I don't know why, but since I'm going to do a little more painting, I'll sand that smooth and repaint it too. Oh yeah. Couple of layers, but we'll be right as rain. I gotta tell you, I am super pleased with how the finish has turned out. I was even able to hide my crimes pretty effectively. All I have to do now is glue in all of my gems and do just a little bit of weathering. Our dagger will be all done.